Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the End the Silence podcast, where we share the real, raw, and authentic experiences of nurses across our great nation and beyond. My guest today is stepping into the Nurse RX client spotlight. As a coach, I have the honor of getting to know my clients on a deeply intimate level, bearing witness to their stories, their pain, their grief, and all their celebrations. It is one of the many gifts of being a wellness coach, and I'm excited to spotlight Jessica Sobey today. She and I met on the tail end of 2020 and have been working together on and off for the last 18 months. She is a kindred soul, and I am so grateful for her trust to walk alongside her on her own unique journey through life and all its challenges. Jess is a mom, she's a nurse, she's an educator, as well as a valuable member of the Nurse RX sisterhood. She has experienced a broad spectrum in her nursing career, and her true calling is any experience that really transcends and transforms people in their lives. She believes that I also believe that empowered people make empowered choices and live better lives where they can learn to care for themselves and extend that to the lives that they touch. I cannot wait to dig in and see what unfolds. Jess, I'm so excited to share this space with you today. Welcome to the show.
That was beautiful and really warm in my heart. Thank you.
And I mean that as a kindred soul, a kindred spirit, whatever you want to say. There are people that you come across in life that just light you, and there's like a magnetism. It's, when I talk about like the yes feeling, you get that with people, and you're one of those people for me from the moment that we met back then when you're sitting on your bedroom floor. I remember it very clearly.
Floor sittings.
Yeah. So tell us, let's kick it off, and you can just share with us a little bit more about your story as a nurse.
Well, I just want to really quickly give a little shout out to Canada, because and the idea of kindred soul, like that term for me came from Anna Green Gables. Like, she would talk about her kindred souls, and I always resonated with that idea. And I feel exactly the same about you and all of the women that I have met on the nurse groups. So, but kindred soul is 100% what you have been for me. So it's been amazing. So thank you for having me. Yeah. So my role, or my trajectory becoming a nurse, is probably a little different. I mean, we're all different, right? But I actually didn't become a registered nurse until I was 34. So I had a bit of a journey before then. I actually really grew up like not liking sick people, not liking being in hospital settings. I remember visiting somebody a great uncle when I was really young, and he had a tracheotomy. I remember actually passed out in the nursing home when I saw sputum coming around. I'll be happy to know that I ended up being a pulmonary nurse. That was my first job. So I got my fair share of sputum and got over that. But I definitely never thought I would be a nurse. I was much more interested in teaching. I was really interested in history. I have an anthropology major from university, and was really into sustainable agriculture. So kind of thought that that's where my trajectory would lead me. And I graduated from college, and unexpectedly was expecting to go on to travel, maybe go to Haiti. I was really hoping to go to Haiti, actually, but found out on my drive home from college, my car broke down. My now husband flew out to Chicago, fixed my car, and several weeks later, I found out that I was expecting. And that was a huge shift for me. That wasn't really in my plans. So shortly after graduating from college, I became a mom. Let me back up. I became pregnant, and my pregnancy was really what shifted me into really becoming passionate about health. I guess I can't say that I was I was athletic, but I wasn't probably the best to my body. I didn't care too much about health. I cared about other things before. I cared about the environment. So I kind of ate well, but not really. And I didn't really know a lot about health before I got pregnant, but I got pregnant and quickly realized that going to Haiti was probably not the best plan for me, and decided to become a teacher. My father was a teacher at a small private school, and I was able to get a job there. And that was my plan. I was going to be a teacher, great hours to be a mom. It was going to work out. My husband and I, we got married and sort of on this little trajectory of life. Shortly after my decision to keep my pregnancy and to have a baby, it was a choice, there was a choice in front of me, and I was really excited and clear on my decision to choose to become a mom. And I felt passionate about having a choice for that. I actually ended up having a really high risk pregnancy and found out I had a bicornuate uterus. My baby had implanted on the septum of my uterus, and I basically like was bleeding. Now, if I was pregnant now, I'd probably be in the hospital my whole pregnancy. But then they were just like, oh, you won't go to term. This will be awful. They just really inundated me with all of the awful things that were going to happen to me any minute. Not knowing when they were going to happen, but they were going to happen. And it was really frightening. And I was really young. And I just, my parents and my husband were like, well, you have to go to the best doctors. And I did. And I was just really inundated in this medical system and a lot of fear and really kind of hopeless. But day by day, I continued to be pregnant and I kept working because that's what they had you do then. They didn't have me on bed rest or anything. And anyway, it was a friend of mine had connected me to this new up and coming little place in the town that I live in of Portland, Maine. And it was called the Ballard House. And it was a freestanding birth center. And it was midwives and doulas and a totally different way of looking at things. And I just went to check it out and somebody said, congratulations. And I was like, oh my God, nobody has said congratulations to me. And from that moment on, it just like shifted my brain and shifted my pregnancy. And of course, my pregnancy still could have, like, I have seen so much. I know that my pregnancy could have turned out to have had all those horrible things that I was told were going to happen, but it didn't. And I was surrounded by just amazing women, really, who educated me, supported me, held me. And I ended up going a week past my due date and having a great delivery. I was able to, I stayed in the high risk. So I had this medical model, but I also had this like kind of alternative model all the way along and was able to birth at a hospital that was like a step down hospital. So it wasn't super high risk. And it was great. I had an amazing experience, a super empowering experience. I was really lucky that breastfeeding went really well for me. And I just was like a born again person. I was like, this is my passion. I fell in love with my own experience and then just wanted to do everything I could to make other people's experience of birth positive. And I became a doula. I got really into childbirth education and got really into this birth center in my city and started a doula group with a bunch of other doulas, and had this whole thing going, and it was great, and attended births at the hospital and at home and all over the place, and loved it, but actually started to say like, okay, it's not just all this wonderful stuff. There's a lot to learn about birth. It's not all like, and I was lucky, and I ended up seeing some really challenging situations as a doula that I felt like I wanted to know more. I wanted to know, like, I wanted to become a nurse, basically, like, and I had never thought that before. I'd never even considered that I would want to know more, or that I'd want to have a more clinical approach to birth, but I did. And I ended up, during that time, I had another child. I waited tables a little bit, which is also like being a nurse. So I was like, oh, I'm good at multitasking and making sure everybody has what they need. But anyway, it was a long trip because my husband worked away. And once I decided to go to nursing school, I had to, like, most of my sciences were not nursing sciences. They certainly weren't the pharmaceuticals, and I hadn't taken bio and chemistry and all that stuff that I needed. So kind of a long road to go back to school with 2 young kids. My husband worked away, and it was just a lot. And I was also doing doula work. And the more that I saw, even at the hospital, I realized, like, I think I really want to have a broad spectrum of nursing experience. Like, I felt like when things went really bad in the hospital, even those nurses didn't always, like, they didn't have a skill set beyond the obstetrical part. So I was really lucky. After I graduated, I got a job in a med surge floor, which is a pulmonary unit, cardiac telemetry. We had a vent unit and a intermediate, like, step down care. And I honestly have to say, like, my first day of being a nurse on my own, I was like, oh, everybody needs a doula. Like, the little men with COPD need a doula. everybody needs an advocate. Everybody needs like somebody just to like listen to them and love them. And like, oh my God, if you're hanging somebody's antibiotics, like you can change their world in 15 minutes just by your presence with a patient. And I freaking loved it. I loved every part of nursing, and I was not expecting that. I was expecting to like just freak out about sputum and cry and want to go home. And like I was just like, oh my God, I love people. I even love sputum. I had one patient that was a long-term patient that happened to live in the hospital, and I fell in love with just the care for him, like and he was a very sick person, but and tons of sputum. And I fell in love with like just caring for him and his family, and they were quirky and funny people. But I felt like, oh my God, I had no idea that I had the capacity to be so present for so many people. And then it just started to like ring true with some of the stuff that I had grown up with. I at home, like a middle child, and I was just really a sensitive kid, I think. And I think being a nurse, like you don't need to be like, it's very helpful to be clinical and to be wicked astute and really quick on your feet. And those are really good skills. And I don't have those skills. And there's nurses that do have like the really like attentive nurses that are like, they know everything and their charting is like on time and they never get out late and they're amazing. And those are amazing nurses. And I love those nurses. My real skill as a nurse was like, just I could relate to almost everyone. Like it was a joy. Like my days would just fly by because, and even that part of the stress of like, the only thing that stressed me out really was like, I didn't really care about being late on meds. I'm like, oh, their antibiotics are late. Sorry, any of my former antibiotic, but it just like that kind of stress didn't get to me. It was like, did I spend enough time with my patient? Was I? And of course you never are able to, but anyway, I did that for a bit. And then I actually applied to labor and delivery in my hospital and didn't get the job. And I was like, wait, what? I didn't get the job. Like, what? Like I've been a doula and I've been a nurse and I'm like a critical care nurse now, or not critical, but like a step down care. And at my hospital, we have like special care and then intermediate care. So anyway, I just couldn't believe I didn't get the job. But the manager was like, oh, well, you should apply again. We gave it to, like a young, cute little thing. And I was like, okay, apply again. I didn't get it again. And I was like, okay, what the actual? And then I applied again. And I was really starting to get burnt out on the respiratory floor. And my sister-in-law was a nurse. And thank God she was a nurse, because so the third time I didn't get the job. And I sat for the interview and I thought it went well. And I thought I was saying all the right things, like, oh, I'm not pie-eyed about birth. Like I know birth can be amazing, but it can also be like horrendous and awful and full of the worst kind of despair you ever see. And like I thought I like covered all the bases and like was really eyes wide open about labor and delivery. And they were like, well, you didn't seem that excited about it. I was like, what? But my sister-in-law encouraged me to reach out to the manager, which I didn't want to do, but she just was like, you should just call and see exactly what they didn't like about you. And I called and I had this really good conversation, and the manager said, you know what, why don't you come do a night shift next week, and we'll just come follow the nurses and like see if you get along with them, and we'll see, we might have another job opening. So I was like, okay. Well, I also decided to do a cleanse that week and get off of coffee which was really stupid. So I ended up like detoxing from coffee on the night that I'm doing my night shift with like my dream job. I'm green like the thing in the back of you. Like I'm green. I'm so sick. Randomly, there was only one patient on the board, and we're like the busiest hospital in the state, so that was uncommon. I was so sick, and the nurse was like, oh, just go take a nap. We always do that. You can go take a nap. Well, I ended up sleeping for like 7 hours of the night shift, which I ended up working on that floor for 10 years. No one takes a nap. Like that does not happen. I wasn't intending to spend this long story on like the backstory, but I woke up like an hour, like I probably woke up at like 5 in the morning. Our shift ends at 7. I kind of like roll back to the nurses station where they all were, and everybody just kind of like sitting there like, oh, how do you feel? I was like, I definitely feel better. Thank you. I'm so sorry. Like I went in and the patient was sleeping too. And I was like, well, that's it. I'm never going to get this job. And I leave the hospital in the morning and I'm calling my my sister-in-law, and I'm like, oh, I just can't believe this. It's so stupid. She's like, what did you do? I was like, I don't know. Like, I can't even believe this. Like, but I still just want to like crawl back into bed and go to bed because I'm sick from not drinking coffee and I just want to die. And I think I'm going to do hospice nursing because that's what I'll have to do. And I can't believe this. And I got a phone call like 45 minutes later and they were like, they loved you. They want you to work with it. Like, you got the job. And I was like, what? So who knows how that all happened. I've never, ever taken a nap working on that unit any other time, but
Can I
a
just
lot of
draw a
love.
frame? I want to draw a
Yeah.
frame because when we were talking before, we were like, about landing and like, manifesting your dreams, and like when you finally let go is when you land, and you're like, I bombed this so big time. I fucking slept the whole
I've slept.
shift. They're not gonna want me. Like, they're not. This was my chance, and I blew it. And you're like defeated. Let go. I'm gonna work in hospice, and you get the call. And it's like I got goosebumps again because I'm like, that is it right there. Like, so you can see there's proof in your own pudding that when you will land, you will land.
Yeah, right. Like, and I would always tell a new nurse kind of, I I think this is the stuff we tell other people, right? And we forget that it does happen in our own lives. And that's like, we talk about it every week, right? Like it's so true. And it was true. And I've had, yeah, proof.
So let's fast forward a little bit to, so when I met you at the end of 2020 in some despair about what was happening. You're now a labor and delivery nurse. You've got this dream job. You speak about birth in the ways that I've never had the beautiful opportunity of hearing about it in that way. Like, I've had 3 kids of my own, so I've experienced birth, and I've, witnessed it as a nurse as well, working in the NICU. That's not generally the nice, pretty births,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, it's like you talk about birth as, this experience. And so maybe let's start there, and then we'll kind of shift into like when we met and like some of the like the current challenges. But I also, when you talk about birth, it's like it lands as far as like the passion and the gift of being a nurse. And so I want to gift that to the listeners because it's really, yeah, your experience with being a labor and delivery nurse. Mm-hmm.
It's gonna make me cry. I'm like so emotional. But yeah, my experience of watching a woman and her, whoever's with her, or and if she doesn't identify as a woman, that too. I've been with people, but my experience of people, and it's actually even, parents that are surrogate parents that are present or in the next room at a birth, like my experience of what birth is really, it is a microcosm. I mean, I use this exact term, but I experience as like a microcosm of life. I think it's like any rite of passage that historically we've had. I mean, of course, birth is a huge rite of passage that has been traditional in every culture ever, right? Like, that's how we have survived as humans, and it is something that some people, just do very passively. And it's like, it just happens, and they've done it 13, 15 times. And it's just, there isn't a lot of ceremony to it. It's just kind of, it's very just, it happens, and their culture doesn't stop for it to happen. It just is a part of it. But I want to take that back because it's not really where I want to go. My experience of birth is that it is one of the only opportunities that we will ever have to experience the entire human experience in a day or an hour or 3 days. There is hopelessness, there is loss, there's pain, there's fear, there's like unbelievable love. I mean, even some of the most, pained human beings that I have cared for. I mean, I've cared for women that have had handcuffs on them while, in the hospital. I've had care for women that are losing a very desired pregnancy. I've cared for women who are giving up a child that they're about to birth, and they have other kids at home. Like, these experiences that people have to be witness to it. One is just, to the emotional part of it is insane. to be witness to the physiological, like the impossible fact that a human being can come out of a vagina is, I mean, every single time I have seen it, I've seen thousands of births, and I'm always like, how's that gonna happen? You know, and it just does. And it's mind blowing. I mean, it's absolutely a miracle, and it makes no sense. And it works. And it almost always works. And then that we have the magic to, if it doesn't work, we have the magic to be able to like operate on a woman and like deliver her baby that way for her and with her. And like that is also beautiful and magical, and like not any less magical than, I mean, also incredible that we have the ability and the skill to have anesthesia to allow somebody to be open, awake, be able to hold their baby, be able to like see their baby come out of their own stomach, that we have the knowledge to be able to sew that woman up and to give her, you know, the antibiotic, all of it. It's just, the world shifts every time a new baby is born. Like there is a shift and you can feel it. And it is miraculous. And it is exactly the same shift that happens in death, which, you know, not all nurses have seen, but most have. And it is exactly the same. And it can be as empowering or as traumatic as a death can be. Like a beautiful death can also be empowering for the person passing, and for the person and for the family around. And so can birth. Like birth can really, I mean, I have seen it for myself, it changed me, but certainly I know that the patients that I was with, they changed. They're different. Every woman, everybody's different. You see a baby born and you're different. And it's so easy to forget, right? Like it's a second. And the oxytocin is in the room and everybody is feeling it, and then it's done. And you go out and you're like, oh my God, I'm starving. Like, I want a cheeseburger. And you're talking about, you know, who knows what with your nurses. But like in that moment, you're just like, this is the coolest thing. And watching the labor progress and that strength. And, you know, I love unmedicated births. I won't lie. It's my favorite because I love watching the buildup, the physiological buildup of the power and the beauty. Like these women just become like, they're ragged, but they're like also just like crazy beautiful. Like it's like the kind of beauty when you run a marathon, it's just insane. And then they transform into these like monsters. They're just monsters. Like what happens? And then in a flash, it's done. And they're cannot even believe, like, you know, and you're just like, I did it. And the disbelief that they just did it. But then like, of course, how amazing and normal it is too. Like, of course, this baby was meant to be here on my chest forever. Like, and that's what it is. And I don't think that there's a person alive that has felt that, has had that experience, that like, when they think of it for themselves, they're like, oh yeah, even those women that have 13 babies. I mean, often those women that have 13 babies, they are like, they can bring it back to me and I'll sleep now. You know, and there's beauty in that too. Like, yes, mama, sleep, because you got 13 kids to deal with at home. Like, yes, sleep. I'll hold this cute little one for you. Mm-hmm. But even then, you know, it's incredible. So I could talk about it. And I think I could talk about it all day. And I think it's such an opportunity. And when people get empowered by it, and when they find their power and they find, and the power doesn't have to be that like, oh, I had a natural childbirth and now I'm empowered. The power has to be like, oh, you know what? Like, I've had a traumatic history and like, I don't want to feel pain. And so for them to find the power to say like, no, I choose not to do that. I mean, that is also equally as beautiful. Like even the labor that an adoptive couple has to go through to do all the laborious paperwork of getting there, and that fear of like, what if the birth mother changes their mind? Like there is a transition that happens in becoming a parent that is so incredible and cool and unique and super common too. So anyway, I could literally, I love it.
My mind is just like, first of all, it was going through all of my births, and then it was going through different experiences I've had as a nurse on both ends of the spectrum, birth and death. And what kind of sparked for me was like, when when a life comes into this world and when a life leaves this
Mm,
world, it's like at that moment in time, I feel like it is a complete alignment. Like in the universe, like when people say like the stars align, it's like in that moment the stars align, like something opens and a
100%.
life comes and lives leave. I mean, it's happening literally every moment.
Minute.
So possibly we are living in that like pure, anyways, I'm going a little bit out there,
No,
but
no,
it
you're not. I
feels
mean,
like
I'm
this pure alignment that we actually have access to all day long. It's not just in your own experience or as a witness to these events, because there is like this miracle, and it is a miracle, and it's kind of magic the way, I mean, it's one of the ways that I have built an appreciation for my body, is looking at it and being like, I created life. Like I created life.
it's definitely the same with death, where like, and right, there's so many ways to pass too. There's so many ways to be born. But there's so many more ways to die, of course. But there's that moment of like, wait, do I hear a heart? Have they passed? They're past. And, it can be really long and slow, and just like a birth, like a labor can take weeks and days, really, like it can, or it can be like, oh my God, I was fine. My water just broke and I am dying right now. Now I'm going to have a baby. Like, it can be very quick. And I think death can be like that too, of course, but there is always that transition moment where it's like,
Holding your
you
breath kind
you
of
have
like,
to
yeah.
stop. Yeah, and it is, and it literally, you have to take a breath, because that's what it all is, right? Like,
Mhm.
it is all about the breath. It is that first breath and that last breath, and there's something, right, and then every breath in between,
Yeah.
and it's incredible.
Yeah. And I think it just represents that cycle that we go through. Like it's such a clear example of the cycle of, birth and death and everything in between. But we actually go through those cycles all the time in our life, right? Like in our lifetime, of birth and death of different things, right? Like in different ways, in different forms.
Yeah, I also had a job on the special infectious disease team, so I did that as well. That was we had a team at my hospital. We were an Ebola center, so we had a team that was prepared for a pandemic. This has been for years, so I was on that. I kind of like a geek. I love, like, was excited to plan for the zombie apocalypse, whatever. I was like all ready for it. Love learning about diseases and whatnot. So that was a side thing that I had. However, before the pandemic, this is well before the pandemic, there was some changes happening in hospital policy around just the flu shot. Always it was an option to get it or not to get it, and it was becoming not to be an option. We were getting that was coming up, and I just knew that for me, the and for lots of reasons that I won't get into here, the flu shot was not an option for me, and medical exemptions were maybe not going to be a thing. However, they ended up being a thing. But I sort of saw that coming down the pike, and right, like, I feel like empowerment, like knowing what you need to do for yourself and what's right for you. And I think I made it kind of clear, like, choice and knowledge are really important. I think people should know as much as they can about what they're putting into their bodies, and make really clear choices based on that. So I foresaw that I might not have a job if I was to decline the flu vaccines. However, that turned out to be okay, but I really started to have a shift in, like, wow, I don't have as much authority here as I thought. Like, things might change for us at some point. So I sort of playing with that idea, just holding space for it, and kind of looking at other alternatives for, like, well, where else could I work? And I did get another job outside of the hospital that I worked at that did not have mandates at this point. This was, before the pandemic. And in March, the pandemic happened, and I was actually really, I mean, I don't want to say excited, but I was excited. Like, I felt very knowledgeable. I felt like, oh my gosh, I know about PAPers, and I can fit test people, and I can do all this stuff. And I was excited to be part of a team. And, like, we kind of hearing the news and, like, seeing it, like, wow, this could really be something. But actually what happened in my hospital was there was some really disheartening things. Like, well, if this is, like we weren't allowed to wear masks and we weren't, and it just didn't, like things weren't making sense to me at all. We weren't allowed to like tell people if they had taken care of somebody who, if a patient had been on a floor and then they tested positive, like we weren't contacting the nurses to tell them that they had been exposed. Like we weren't allowed, and everybody, we were kind of going around the hospital. We were setting up COVID units. We were helping people don and doff their PAP. We had PAPers at our hospital, so we were very lucky because we were this Ebola center. We had a lot of PPE. We always had a lot. We still do. So that was really tricky because we were like limiting what the nurses could have. And I felt like, why aren't we protecting our nurses? And I really was very upset with that. And then it just really bubbled out of control. And people were getting, they weren't accepting, they just weren't taking care of the nurses, and they weren't taking care of the staff. They weren't taking care of the house cleaning. They weren't taking care of anybody. And I was really morally distraught. I was also working 3 jobs at this point. I was doing the labor and delivery. I was working at an outpatient center for infusions, and I was working on the SIDT team, which was the infectious disease team. And I was working kind of overtime, and nothing was aligning. Nothing felt right. We were also, my hospital, I know in Canada, you guys are all unionized, I think, but we are not. And so my hospital was also transitioning to a union, to being a union hospital. And there was a big vote. There was a lot of drama. There was a lot of push and pull. And I was obviously had to like have a big political stance about that. So I was very involved in the union movement and ended up really butting heads with my manager. And really that, who had been a friend of mine and who actually was a new manager, but she had been the woman she wasn't my manager when I first got hired to labor and delivery. She had been my mentor. So, excuse me, it was kind of devastating to start to feel like somewhat betrayed by the system that I was working in, that I had sort of found cause to love, and to be like, oh, well, it's okay that we're, like I was really turning a blind eye to some of the medical things that were happening, some of the things that I felt like weren't right for patients, because I was getting so upset with what wasn't right for nurses. And it got really mixed, and really just, I was just devastated. And I walked away. I declined getting the vaccine, and the mandates were really, my state was one of the first states that had a mandate. So there was no medical mandate. So even though I had a medical exemption, they weren't taking medical exemptions at my hospital. Even if you had anaphylaxis, they were saying you need to be in the hospital and we'll give you the shot and we'll have anesthesia there if they need to intubate you. Like crazy stuff. And just, anyway, a lot of the nurses that made the same decision as me, they waited and got fired. I decided that like I've never been fired from a job, and I just had to walk away. And it was the hardest thing I ever did. And and it sucks. Like I am heartbroken, but I feel really like I've always just felt like we have to be in some empowerment around the choices we make for ourself. And I have no problem with other people making the decisions. I support decisions. I want people to feel good in the choices that they're making. And I want people to feel empowered and strengthened and like safer. Like if you feel safe, I want that for you. I want everyone to feel safe, because we all do better when we feel safe. Like I know that. And I didn't feel safe anymore. I didn't feel like I trusted the hospital system to take care of the nurses. I felt like there was a lot of betrayal. I started sort of like seeing things that I couldn't believe. Like I worked for 8 years without getting a raise. Like and maybe it was 6 years. I'm sorry. I exaggerated that. We didn't get raises. Like the price of milk is $4.69 for a gallon of milk. And I was making the same amount of money that I had made 8 years before, and new nurses were coming in making more money than me. It was just crazy. Like the system was so messed up in the hospital. And I think we can all attest. I would work 14, 15 hours and wouldn't go pee. I mean, legit, like wouldn't have time to go pee because there would be nobody else to watch. Most of our patients are continuous monitoring. And, I'd had bad experiences where like somebody was watching my patient and their patient and another patient when I would go pee, and I came back and the baby's having a huge D cell and the nurse is in another room because, she had to go to her room. It did not feel safe to leave a computer screen. It did not feel safe to leave your patient. It did not feel safe to get food. There was nowhere. And then, and then of course, well, we can't eat at the desks. So you couldn't eat, you couldn't have water. You couldn't, it was just like, what am I doing? And so I left, and it's been hard, and it's sad to leave something that you truly feel you have a calling for, and forget about the politics, like feeling like, oh my God, what do all these doctors who I know, and I know they loved me, like what do they think of me now? Do they think I don't care about public health? Do they think, it's been traumatizing to reckon, it's not traumatizing, that's not the right word, but it's been hard to stay in something that I really do believe in. Fundamentally, I believe that people should just have choices in their body always. And those choices have consequences, right?
I think where it lands to is, it ties so closely to what we were talking about as like the role of nurses in with our patients, of empowering them, not taking away their power, making us the expert, making us the decision maker, but empowering them with information, with choice. And that is, I believe, a very fundamental part of nursing. It has always been for me. And to see that aspect it's been kind of thrown out. And the trust, I think, is the erosion of trust, I think, is the fallout of taking away people's right to choose. And of course, this is a difficult topic, right? What I want to hear is how this has impacted you, because standing in a position of making a choice with a lot to lose, also because this is the language we use, there's also a lot to gain from standing in your truth and standing in alignment with what is right for you, but also a lot to lose. And that grieving aspect, the grief and the loss and the betrayal and that erosion of trust that comes with betrayal, it has a huge impact on us, as we are human beings. And, a lot of what I'm witnessing, it is trauma. It is trauma, because at the essence of trauma is feeling unsafe. And what you have just talked about too is how, you want for everyone, just like you want for yourself, to feel safe. We all do better when we feel safe. So when we are pushing people or manipulating in some way to put them into situations where they're forced to make a choice that doesn't allow them to feel safe, that's trauma. And betrayal is trauma, and discrimination is trauma. So we are in the middle of a significant systemic trauma. And I think it's so important that we acknowledge that, because it's impacting us all in different ways. And when you take action in your life, no matter what role you play, and you impact somebody else's feeling of safety, that's not something to take lightly, because that is a difficult thing to overcome. We've all experienced it to some degree in our life, right? But everyone over the last couple of years has felt elements of being unsafe, no matter what your choice and beliefs have been, right? Yeah.
100%.
So tell me, Jess, you've walked away from your dream job that, you worked hard to get to, and it was passionately aligned for you.
Yeah.
And I know it wasn't a easy decision to do that. And I'm curious, where does it go from here for you? Where do you think?
Yeah, I'm curious to find out. I do have a job nursing. It's a job that is fulfilling in certain ways, and I can certainly go to the bathroom whenever I want to and eat at my desk and have really sweet interactions with people that are just amazing and precious, and I love it, but it is certainly not my calling, and it is a lot of head lice involved. So, but it's sweet for now, and it's allowing me to, because I did take a little time off, and that was, I really felt like I couldn't land at all. And for me, I just needed to, I think I needed to have my feet a little bit on the ground.
Yeah.
and just sort of see things. So I am really considering doing some sort of nurse advocacy, whether it is, I know I could be a doula again, and the requirements for doulas are, again, that's an individual choice, and a patient would hire me and they would know my reality and they would do what feels right for them if that worked for them. I know a ton of people in this my town and my community. There are places in the States where a medical exemption would probably would be fine and would work. There are, I'm not exactly sure. I also have really high dreams of creating something new and different that other people are also doing. So what I'm mostly trying to do is align myself with people. I think at first I was like very kind of competitive and wanted to like not like, I just kept feeling like I can't do what they're doing. Oh, Sandra created this great thing, but like I can't do that, or I could be a doula, but like I can't do that, or I could be a nurse advocate. I got a couple private nurse jobs for families, and I loved that. Like, but I was like, I can't do that. Just happened, So there's some form of creating. Like I have a big ball of clay, and there's like some shape to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The shape has branches for sure. Like I'm very interested in birth, and I'm very interested in death, and I'm equally interested in other transformative experiences. So whether that's being a nurse advocate and working with people who need to navigate the healthcare system, which is literally falling apart in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, I talk to all my dearest friends at the hospital. It's hard to sometimes hear, but it is imploding. It is imploding at,
Mm-hmm.
and of course babies are still being born, and can be safe, but it's also like it's not good. And, the hospital is hemorrhaging money, and nurses are making more money right now than they've ever made, and all of this money that they said they couldn't give us a 20-cent raise, and now they're paying nurses $500 to just come in extra on top of time and a half. It's like, oh, you did have money. Oh, there was money for this. You said there wasn't, but there actually was money to pay the nurses. Like, it's very eye-opening. And I guess there's a big part of me that just wants to say, like, as much as I am so sad that I'm not delivering babies every day and getting to be that magical player in a really beautiful experience or a really hard experience or whatever the experience is for a patient, I'm not sad to walk away right now from a system that, right, like I wanted to work within it to maybe make some positive changes. And we were talking about this earlier, like, okay, so that didn't work. I couldn't change the medical centers. Like I couldn't make every birth amazing, and I couldn't make every nurse get, although like the nurses are making more money, so maybe that my union work helped. But
there's like
interested in the communities in my neighborhood.
the sentiment of like whenever one door closes, another one opens. As nauseating as that might be when a door is closed, angering it might be, all the things, frustrating, anxiety provoking, all of the things. It is true. And like, it's okay that you haven't landed, feet firmly planted and know exactly the path that you're taking. I think that's the kind of the beauty of, how we talk about square one of life, and when, stuff happens and it throws you back, and taking your time to really move through this chapter without rushing and just, putting a band-aid on it or stuffing down what has happened and the experience that you're going through is like, it's really important, and it's really transformational for yourself to pull yourself into that alignment as you do move forward, and just circling back to like when you were talking about the experience with the labor and delivery job, and when you fell asleep on the shift, right? Like, just what I framed in that moment is like, when you surrender and you let it go, and you really let it go, as easy as that is to be said, very difficult to be done. But when that moment arrives for you is when the door will open. It's this natural cycle, right? Like there is a death right now in your parts of your career. And so what's going to open on the other side is, just yet to be birthed.
Well, and as I truly feel that most people that are going through a birth, they do much. I mean, some people or can really do it independently, and that's a cool thing. But I'm a people person, and like having a coach, like having this sisterhood of women that, okay, like, okay, this is where you're at now. Like, this isn't going to be where you're at tomorrow. You're not going to be here. You're not going to be stuck at 4 centimeters forever. Oh, but 7 centimeters feels a lot worse than 4 centimeters. But you're right. Like, then you get to the birth. Like, I do have faith in that, and I do trust it, and I do really value. I'm very lucky, fortunate to have this time, and to, I'm not making nearly as much money as I was, but I'm safe with my money situation, and I'm supported by a pretty awesome partner in that sense. But he doesn't honor like what I'm actually going through. Like, he doesn't understand what it's like to have a job where you're so intimate with other people every day, like literally holding somebody's life in your hand, and then being taken away from that. I mean, it is shattering to my personhood. And it's also like, wow, it's been this experience, not just with you, but with all of the women. But I mean, a lot of the routines that we do, like, they're they are my, like, they're, and sometimes I get frustrated because I'm like, I still don't know, but like, but I do, and I'm getting places, and I know that I don't not want to work. And anyway, I reached out to her, and she immediately was like, oh, to you need to talk to Sandra. And I'm like, one more person that's going to be amazing in my life. I've told you this before, like, that's great, but also, like, I don't know, but like, have it, the fact that I don't have to explain what it's like to not pee for 12 hours. Like, there's not one nurse that doesn't know what that's like, or to like, oh my God, they want me to do the stupidest charting. Like, how do I chart all the stuff I just did? I can't chart that. Unchartable.
Mm-hmm.
Not, you cannot chart what you do in a day as a nurse. And to not have to explain that to somebody, like, but to have a group that's like, you don't have to, I mean, we can all just commiserate. And like, I don't have to have been, a flight nurse to know how hard somebody worked to become a flight nurse, and to know, even though her trauma is so different than my trauma, the things I've seen, billions of people in the world, like, we are so lucky to see all these unique and awful, terrible things that happen to people. And it is heavy. We are holding it, and we cannot do it alone, and we need each other. And not being in the hospital, I've lost that group of people, but I found another one, and I'm so endlessly great. I'm just endlessly grateful for every bit of it. And I'll just also do a plug for, like, who else stays up all night watching Netflix? Like, I know there's other people that do it, but there's not other people that do it and then work and like save lives the next day. So thank you for making it real. And then also, like, for all the little things and all the big things. I mean that, like, we can talk about real big life stuff, but we also, like, can talk about sputum.
Yeah. There is like unexplainable magic again in the groups of nurses that have come together through this program. And you were one of the originals, like one of the OG the OG Nurse RX. And it's been quite a journey for me. But when I think about nurses, is like this is like very heavy work that nurses do. The general public hasn't a hot clue what nurses do and what they go through. And it's downplayed. A lot of us are silenced, told not to share, told not to talk about what it's like. And, I think what the group offers when it boils down to it is a connection in a safe container. It's like, this is where you can come and you can just lay it all out on the table. You can talk about wherever you're at, celebrate yourself, you can commiserate, you can all share those experiences. Like, you don't have to explain what it's like, because everybody gets it. If you've been a nurse, even if you've been a nurse for 6 months, you know what it's like. Like, there is the whole range of experiences with human beings, and it is a blessing, but it's also extremely heavy. And particularly, you know, as you were talking about like being sensitive as a child, like particularly as a sensitive person or an empath, like this is really hard work. And so, you know, stepping into this as a coach for nurses is like, you know, I feel like I'm holding all of that with you guys too. But then also in my effort is really to create a space where you guys can unload and you can share the load. And it's funny how like even though she might be holding part of what you're carrying because you're sharing about your experience, so now she's holding a bit of it, so it's lighter for you, but by her holding yours it actually becomes lighter for her. And there's just this it's really magic because, and you know, it's not magic completely because there is like neuroscience between what happens when we're,
Yeah, I mean,
you know, with there's science to back it up, but there's also just the witnessing of this beautiful human connection that we experience as nurses and we can give back to each other. So yeah.
that's the thing, and nobody can give it back to you like a nurse, right? Like I don't think that there are people that are better at listening and helping you process and holding space, because as nurses we all know too, like, and you can't change somebody's situation really, like you can only hold them really in it, and you can't change the reality, right? You can change the experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what my experience has been here too. It's like the reality is the same. Like I have lost a lot. That's my reality. But right, also my experience is like, yes, I am gaining things. I am gaining friendships. I'm gaining ways of coping. I'm gaining ways of thinking about myself and ways of thinking about nursing.
Well,
Sidebar.
you know, as my Kundalini teacher, she's just got all these little nuggets, but she always says, you'll always have as much time as you need. So, you know, whatever was lined up for you over the last, like, you know, as I was thinking back, like it has been 18 months since we met. And there's just, you know,
I was like,
things,
is that all?
yeah, but then at the same time it's like it's been 18 months. So, but it feels like there's still so much to come. Like we, you know, you're at where you're at right now, I'm at where I'm at right now. It's like, you know, fast forward a year from now, 3 years from now, like there's so much to come. Hopefully, you know, I guess
Oh, for sure.
we really
There
don't know
is.
how much time we have, but at the same
All
time,
right.
it's like, let's make the use of the time we're given. Before we go, could you share, like, if you were to talk to your 35-year-old self that was getting into nursing, what would be like your top advice for her?
My top advice would be take better physical care of yourself at work. I know that sounds really, I did not drink water at work. I did not go to the bath. I mean, I really didn't. I just always put my patient like in all of the things that needed to be done. And I didn't know how to, I didn't take breaks at all. Like I just felt like if I'm not there, if I'm not like doing all of it all the time, and there, I think I didn't realize like this idea of being a hero, kind of like how that fed me, literally fed me. Like I didn't feel hungry at work until I got home, and I'd be like, could bear, you know, I was like peeing in the parking lot and like barely, like I would just come home and like house you know, a whole kitchen full of food. And like it just, and then I would like say, well, I don't, you know, I would be wasted on my days off. And so I think if I could change anything about the way that about my nursing is, it would be to just take better self-care. I couldn't figure out how to do it. I felt like I was not a good nurse if I took a break. And it really wasn't until my last 2 years that I was like, and really getting involved with our union, actually organizing and just being like, no, we need to take breaks. And like, yes, sometimes I might miss a delivery because I have to take a break. And if the only way a system is going to allow me to do it is like at this time, then I have to walk away. I have to say like, yes, somebody else can be there for that half an hour. It's not my responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And that we do not owe the hospital. We owe our patients and we owe ourselves. And in between there, we don't owe a broken system that can't support enough nurses on the floor. We don't owe them our health, and we don't owe them our time with our families, like to come home and just like not even be able to talk to my kids who I didn't see all day because I was stuffing food in my face, or just exhausted, or just wanted to like watch Netflix. That isn't why I became a nurse, to like not be a good mom. Mm-hmm. So I think that, and to have, confidence in my ability to learn new skills. I think I had a lot of insecurities of like, the skills are like, find somebody who's good at it and buddy up with them if you can. Learn everything you can. You never know when you're going to need it.
I really want to just honor you for like owning that piece of like wanting to be the hero or needing to be the hero, because I don't think it's talked about enough of how we push ourselves. Yes, there is like these expectations, there is this idol in nursing that we strive to be like, and we push ourselves, but there is also, I think, a part that we hold in ourselves too of like needing to be the one. I know I can really resonate with that. I can remember specifically an incident of a younger nurse who I didn't really fully trust, and she kept going over to my patient's bedside. I was in a NICU, so it was like a tight little pod, right? And she kept going over to my patient, my baby, and adjusting things, and I snapped.
My baby.
Yeah. And I snapped, and I was really rude, and somebody called me on it, and that's like it's hung with me because it's not who I am.
Yeah.
But I think we take like such pride in our work and ownership, and there's those expectations, and we carry a lot of these patterns of perfectionism and needing to be seen as the one that has it all together, who can figure it all out. Like all of that shit is just such a heavy burden to carry, of all of those expectations, whether they're coming from the system, our employer, our colleagues, or from within us. But it's like, what I hear you as your advice to your younger self is like, you need to take the cape off sometimes.
Totally.
and eat and pee and say no. And like, and I feel like even, your decision to walk away from your job is like, taking off that cape in some way like that. There's an element of that, of, I don't know if you've considered that piece of like, giving up that ownership and like that pride and that need. It's almost like approving that we get into.
I haven't thought of it that way actually. And that's it. I haven't thought of it that way. And it's actually a really poignant thought. And I have to think more on it because I've been humbled. I've been like, oh, I'm like, the hospital didn't fall down. Like I have gotten some really nice, like, oh, we miss yous, but like hospital didn't stop when I left. And and that's okay. Like, but taking the cape off is like, okay, it is time to take care of me. And I think also just, just reflecting on my own life, like being a young mom and then going to school, like I have always been giving to other people. And a lot of that is avoidance of taking care of myself. It is very easy. And I know so many good nurses that are all in the same boat. Like we're not. I mean, some of us might be super like awesome workout people, or some of us might be super awesome like housemakers or artists, or we might have all these other side parts, but we don't always like holistically kind of hold space for our just really taking care of ourselves and taking ownership of, I don't know, I'm babbling now. I can feel myself losing it a little bit. I'm gonna miss that.
No,
but
we can,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
and we'll just seal it for, we've been talking for a long time anyway, so it's like so this has been like a lot. I mean, to unpack, to ask you to unpack like kind of your story in a short little nugget of time, although I know we could talk forever, and someday we will, at a bonfire with like sleeping bags under the stars. I know that day will come. and I look forward to it, because it's really just truly, it's such a pleasure to be with you. Like I said in the beginning, there's a connection that is undeniable. There's a magnetism, and I just love hearing you speak and hearing your perspective, and then bouncing. And I think for me, it's a real reflection of myself and just what I see in myself and what I'm missing in myself. It's like, that's, I think, our whole human dynamic too, and part of what really shines in group work. But I really just, again, want to honor you for being here, for sharing your story, for sharing your truth, for sitting in your muck and being willing to go through everything that is being thrown at you or thrown for you, whichever way we want to say it, and just, leaning in to the uncertainty and the difficulty that is inevitable in life, with this capacity to trust that eventually your feet will hit the ground, and that this work you are doing for yourself is so freaking honorable and important, because when your feet land, it's going to be in complete alignment. It's not going to feel like you're sacrificing any of yourself or giving away any of your power. You're going to be in that space of, as you take steps, no matter what it looks like. And it'll change. It's not going to be the same forever either. Like, no matter what you choose now or in 6 months, it's going to change. That's just life, right? That's the cycles that we were talking about right in the beginning of birth and death, and how it shows up in so many different ways in life. So I'm so grateful for you, for our relationship, for our friendship. And, if we could cheers, I would say, like, cheers to everything that's yet to come. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. If I could say one word that would just sum it up, it would obviously be namaste, which is like the light in me. It's just a reflection of the light in you. And like, I am so honored and really want to just thank you for giving me this space.
I personally want to thank you for taking your time to listen to this podcast. It is my truest honor to sit with these nurses and witness them tell parts of their story. We as human beings have a deep need to be seen and heard, and this is my way of helping nurses in particular find their voice. We are sharing our truth, and that may not always resonate with you, but I'm guessing if you're still here that something has rung true for you in this podcast. Our stories offer healing and create connection, two things that we as nurses need as we navigate the jungle of a healthcare career. So thank you for being witness. And if you'd like to share your story on the End the Silence podcast, be sure to reach out. When we can come out of the shadows and into our light, we can create the change that is needed. And when we do this work together, we are so much stronger. Thank you for listening.